This should be information that underlines what we need to do to move this country forward.
Well, hello, everybody. It's David Leis, your proud host of Leaders on the Frontier. A warm welcome to everybody for joining us on April 16, 2026, the year of our Lord. We're got an important program today as we talk about, so what? We've got a majority in the federal House of Commons. Does that mean anything? Is it a big deal as it relates to the world of public policy? And what does it matter in terms of governance? And of course, the issues that impact you every day. So we're going to dare to talk about this. We've got an extraordinary panel. So I'm really excited about hearing their thoughts. And I'm also excited about hearing your thoughts and your comments. Keep them coming by the thousands every month. We really do appreciate it. And good afternoon to everyone. And that's from Prairie. So thank you so much for joining us. We really do appreciate your encouragement. And speaking of comments, I want to share with you wow, what truth, so refreshing to hear some. And that's from Allison Dunn. Thank you. And thanks for bringing on Dan Mateague. A huge respect for this man who is so intelligent and tells it like it is. And a lot of exclamation marks. And that is from Linda Pollock. And that's from the program that was released this week as we talked about what we would refer to as what is really going on with delusional energy policies, that we would call them, that has really impacted every Canadian profoundly at the pump. So stay tuned on that one if you haven't seen it. I also wanted to mention a longer comment from Kathy Lingill, who says, this broadcast was great, informative with facts and language. We need a channel on TV that the brainwashed and misinformed can easily access, so it is easy to reach as the, quote, liberal propaganda or mainstream media. I'm at the point where I can't even put the national news on because it's so infuriating. Thank you very much, Kathy. And speaking of TV, we are on TV. You can find us on a number of TV networks right across the country, from Merit TV, Miracle, and those are across not only on Rogers or Shaw, but on so many other cable providers, including in Saskatchewan, Alberta, and Manitoba. So be sure to look at that. And I forgot TELUS, no offense to them, but they're on board as well. So we're really excited about that as we reach millions of people. So that's a good question. This is a comment from Donna Applegate. So much corruption in the government. I think that's a concerning question. And I just want to be able to just say, look, we've got a situation here where a majority government has really changed things, or has it? So that's going to be the topic. And just some news headlines that I think you'll find fascinating. Of course, we'll lead off with that one about the majority government as we talk about how did we get here. That's obviously big news. A majority government, for the record, in the federal government is 172 seats. Well, now the governing party has reached 174, hook or by crook, and that includes through floor crossers. And there's a number of them here, both from the Conservatives and the NDP. They've switched sides to the Liberals, and you know who they are. And then we also have 3 by-elections that came in this past Monday, and that was the Liberal candidate Danielle Martin at University of Rosedale, and then followed by Liberal candidate Tatiana Auguste in Terrebonne, Quebec, and then finally Liberal candidate Dolly, pardon me, the pronunciation, Begum at Scarborough Southwest. So in light of that, they have met, that's a key headline. And then if we turn to an interesting story I picked up through Blacklock's, that there's 28% more staff than inmates in the federal prison system. And it's an interesting question. What does that mean? Is that kind of conventional practice? Research suggests that's perhaps a bit high, but it's an interesting point of fact there. And then we have, of course, in the Carney government just unveiled a temporary cut to taxes. I believe it's basically 10% on regular gas, and then diesel will also come down a little bit, and comes into effect on Monday. What do you think about that? Is that going to make a big difference? And then we have also another story coming in from BC with the EB government. And this is an important one as it unfolds regarding the whole issue of the uncertainty regarding property rights. the government not only applied a number of laws to deal with land acknowledgements, but also the whole issue of DRIPA. So stay tuned on that story as the EB government has backed down on it to make it a confidence vote. There's also calls by the opposition leader, Pierre Poilievre, to clarify the issue of property rights. And here he is making that statement there. In other news, we also have the continued issue of the U.S. Navy stopping a number of ships from passing Iranian ports, blockades, as they try to secure that whole waterway. And then finally, the protests in Ireland continue, and this is creating a constitutional crisis as people react to what is it called again? Oh, yeah, carbon taxes at the pump. So that is a fascinating story that is unfolding as we get a glimpse of those issues. And I want to turn now to the topic at hand, which is, of course, as we move from minority governments to majorities. Now, it's very interesting in the case of fact, from 2019, if memory serves me correctly, we've been living with a minority government. Now we are finally reached a majority government, and the proviso is that during that minority government, the NDP and the Liberals have really been governing together, and that's maybe a question I'll pose to my panel that I want to introduce now. And I want to welcome Georganne Burke. Georganne is a well-known political commentator, good friend. She's also a partner with the Pathway Group, and she knows Ottawa very well. And she joins us from Israel in the heart of Jerusalem. So a warm welcome to you. And what time is it there in Jerusalem, Georganne?
10:08 p.m.
So how are things going in Israel? I mean, obviously you're really in the thick of things as we look at the conflict with Iran. What's your experience like? Are you seeing a lot of activity?
Well, since the ceasefire, it's very quiet. Everyone has returned to work and to school, and everything is open here, and people are resuming their normal lives. They pretty much had a normal life here before, even when things were going on, but periodically people would have to run into a bomb shelter because there was an alert. Jerusalem fared better than many of the cities in Israel because I'm assuming Iran thought it would be too controversial to throw bombs this way, being the holy city and all of that. But there were a couple of incidents. There was one not far from here at the old city, at the outside wall. A missile got there. I'm sure it was a mistake. And as I mentioned to you, David, the other night, just before the ceasefire kicked in, 2:00, a little before 2:00 in the morning, we heard an alarm, an alert, and then a siren, and then a massive boom. And we realized that it was the Iron Dome knocking a missile out right near here. It wasn't far. The building shook that we're in, so it was close. But nothing since the ceasefire. It's been quiet. There's been a single alert, except for the alert that kind of made me sit up, which was the alert for the acknowledgement of Holocaust Memorial Day here. They do a siren. It's the same siren, or very similar to the one that they do for the bomb alerts. Not exactly the same, and it runs for about a minute, and everything in Israel stops. Cars, buses, streetcars, the trains, people stop walking, people stop playing in the park, the teachers stop teaching and the kids stand up. Everyone stops for 1 minute to acknowledge the Holocaust.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for joining us, Georganne, from Jerusalem, and for sharing that kind of insight on kind of the realities of daily life there in that part of the Middle East. And we certainly are hopeful for a resolution of that conflict there. So we're really glad you could join us.
Thank you.
The other member that is joining us is a familiar face to us, and that is the Vice President of Research, Dr. Marco Navarro-Genie. And we're so delighted you could join us from Calgary, where I understand there's a little bit of snow coming along there.
Yes, not like Jerusalem. We're expecting about 14, 15 centimeters of snow in the next 24 hours. So springtime in Alberta, as Ian Tyson would say.
So there you go. The realities from around the world here, and so glad that you could join us as usual, Marco,
Thank you.
because I think you're really. I'm really excited about what your analyses are, Georganne and Marco, and as well as the audience. Because if we look at, say, the political science of this, there's a lot of interesting questions to ask about the significance of a majority. And I'm going to ask you, Georganne, first. How would you characterize this in general terms? Is this a big deal to get to switch from a minority to a majority government now?
I think it's a very big deal on many levels. Obviously, majority government in Canada has complete control over everything. They have control over the legislature, the executive, and the judicial. Everything is under their control. In addition, they can do things that people may not like, but they can do them because they have a majority of the votes. Only if there were people that revolted in their caucus, which I doubt will happen, that would be the only thing that would be a sort of a safety valve. It is not. It is the opposite of the United States, the way things operate there. I lived in Canada for almost 40 years, and I've watched this, the ebbs and flows of minority and majority governments, and there's a vast difference between the two. Minority governments have to tread pretty carefully. Trudeau was accused all the time of running his minority government like a majority because he teamed up with the NDP and effectively had that. But he was still in a position where he had to go ask somebody else for help. He couldn't do it himself. Now, Carney doesn't have to ask anybody for anything. So that's the thing that's actually, I think, concerning me.
Okay, so I just want to just clarify here, to be very blunt. Then, the common perception, I've seen this in the audience comments, is the concern that the majority is a big deal because you really have an executive now, specifically the prime minister, because so much the concern is very apparent that a lot of power is concentrated with the prime minister's office, and it is really largely unchecked now. Is that your characterization now? Is that a concern?
That is exactly the concern that I have. I don't think, I think that Mark Carney is very different from anybody that I've seen in that position in Canada since I've lived here, in that he's characterized as a technocrat. I think he's actually more of an autocrat. Now he's got this power. We're going to see who the real Mark Carney is.
Interesting. So we will see who the real Mark Carney is in that respect, because he's at the center, underlined, of this government and policy.
Right.
Marco, what are your comments? What's the significance of a majority government?
Excuse me. There are a few. The first one is, of course, that majority governments do exist. And they exist when the voters of the country in a general election grant a particular faction in parliament a majority, and that's entirely legitimate. The issue here, and legitimate in the sense that all the powers that Georganne mentions, therefore, are in the hands of the government because the voters decided that it should be so. What is tricky here, of course, is that the voters actually sent a different message in the last election. You might say that there is an implicit sort of will in the electorate that this government or this faction in the House of Commons should not have a majority. That was the will of the electorate. And so that means that, therefore, the power that Georganne was mentioning, which is significant, that the voters do not implicitly trust the government with, or this faction with, those powers, and that the government has gone around in a sort of a roundabout way, this is the reference to backroom deals, to grab that power that the electorate did not give them. And so the question are two different things, right? The floor crossing questions and whether that's legitimate is one thing, and of course it is, and is permitted and what have you. But what is the issue that I want to raise is the idea that a faction in parliament can subvert, in a sense, the will of the electorate by going behind them and grabbing power in that way. I don't mean to say that it's a Latin American coup or anything like that, but it's a mini version of that in a sense. And so that poses a significant number of concerns. So it's not just a minor procedural issue, it is a constitutional question.
Okay. So within our constitutional tradition of what it defines to govern well, to govern honorably, to use the language, is to listen carefully to the will of the electorate. And you can clearly see that there's a significant division in this country, and that in the last election, there was it was a very close election. And I think, Marco, you're saying, well, one has to keep that in mind as we govern. So that will be interesting to see if that will be respected. I did want to share a clip here from the Prime Minister when he was asked more about this question about a majority government.
Are you concerned the way you got your majority will erode Canadians' trust in our democracy?
Well, first, I'd point to the election results last night. We have a majority now in the House of Commons, thanks to the electors in Scarborough Southwest, in Terrebonne, and in University Rosedale. And as concerns individual deputies who make a choice to support the government's program at this crucial time for the country, whether they're from whatever political stripe, orientation, geographic region they come, consistent with the government program, we're fortunate to have them, and we're moving forward together with them. It's a strong vote in favor of those individual deputies, and I would remind that we are in a parliamentary democracy. Canadians elect the deputies. We're fortunate that we have 3 outstanding new deputies as part of our governing caucus: Dolly Begum, Daniel Martin, and Tatiana Auguste, and that we accept the results, as I said at the start, with both humility but also determination, because it's a vote for the government's plan, those deputies, and for the government plan. We know we need to continue to work with all parliamentarians. We will do so. Work with all premiers, which we will do so. Work for all Canadians.
So that's some interesting comments from the Prime Minister, Georganne. What's your comment about, what you heard and also the plan that they're going to be pursuing? What does that mean?
His math is a little off. If you subtract the 5 people that crossed the floor, he doesn't have a majority. Just saying. So
okay.
his math
but
is
just hold on a second. So the punchline is
he stepped away from the question by saying we won the 3 by-elections. That's not
right.
how we got his majority.
Okay, so you're making a distinction that the floor crossers really are unusual and don't necessarily mean a legitimate pathway to a majority. Is that what you're getting at?
Yeah, I mean, like they would have had 5 less, which is 169, not 172. So they got 5 floor crossers. They won 3 seats, 2 of which they already had, one of which was temporarily out of their grasp. Okay. It was another close one there, but not quite as close as the last one. And I mean, I just see this as a massive abuse of power. There is the authority, the power in parliamentary governments to allow people to cross the floor. I hate it personally. I don't like it. I don't like it when it's done in the United States. It's very rare there, but I don't like it. It seems a betrayal of the voters. But here, this is not the one-off, like even a Belinda Stronach or a Leona Alislev or David Emerson. Those were one-offs. And they didn't change our status as a party, right?
Okay, so I'm wondering if we could just dive down into the floor crossing question, because I think that I'll share with you the framework I look at it. I understand in our parliamentary democratic system, there's a long history of floor crossing. We examined this in a live a few weeks ago. But I think that it's fair to say that many of the floor crossings in the past have always been based on a principled policy reason or some type of principle of conscience. And you can debate the edges of that, but these ones, I have tried to listen carefully to the rationale of every one of the floor crossers, and I'm not able to discern, and maybe I'm not listening carefully enough. I'm not able to discern what the principal policy issue is, other than wanting to somehow be in government, and somehow this is the basis in which to serve their constituents better. So am I onto something here, Marco? Is that a difference that we're seeing in floor crossing? And is that frankly honorable or in keeping with that tradition of floor crossing?
It helps to contrast these things. So, for example, I'm reminded of one of the most famous floor crossers in the history of this country was David Kilgour.
Yes.
Kilgour
Right.
repudiated the GST implementation
Yeah.
back in 1990, I think it was.
And that was the member from Edmonton, as I recall.
Right, and the difference is, of course, that he alleged that it was done on principle, and that he was stepping away from a government caucus, and he went to sit as an independent. And much later, he joined the Liberals, which is fine. And eventually, he also left them over questions of principle. So that's the contrast versus, say, for example, somebody like Marilyn, who also made a case that she was doing this on principle. But here's the thing. I remind the audience that we talked about Edmund Burke, and Burke argued, and I think correctly, and he submitted himself to the idea that representatives are voted upon to be essentially to use their judgment for their decisions. Mm-hmm. They are not supposed to be essentially extensions of the will of any single individual, because when there are so many people voting for you, whose will exactly are you gonna follow? So you have to come up with your own judgment. And what Marilyn Gladue argues is that she was crossing the floor because she had a principled position. She had disagreed over policies and things with the Conservatives. But on the day that she crosses, she also declares that she will vote exactly the way the other guys want her to. Mm-hmm. So you can't, on the one hand, argue that you're crossing on a question of principle, and then with the other hand, trade your principles as you put your red jersey on, mm-hmm, right? Mm-hmm. And so that is the key issue. But going back to the question that the journalist asked the Prime Minister, I think Georganne is correct. He dodged the question. The question really was about trust. Right? And trust is a principal component in a liberal democracy. Mm-hmm. We have to trust the government that rules over us, because if we don't, then the relationship is severed in ways that impair their actions as well as our endorsement of them. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And the issue is this. I don't mean to belabor the point, but the issue is this. If in an election the electorate give you X number of seats, and that is their will, then do you, at any point, this sets the precedent that at any point, a government with a minority of seats can go around and around and around the seats on the other side, recruiting them to come over to their side to have the number requisite to have a majority, and therefore, again, is a repudiation of the will of the electorate. And that is why it's a constitutional issue. We can concentrate on the individual cases of people crossing the floor, but the larger issue really is the concerted, willful, deliberate attempt at bypassing the general will of the electorate.
Okay, I think you're onto something. We're getting a lot of reaction. We heard thank yous from the audience. I mean, to your point, this is spoken as a political science. We have a culture, a tradition that frames up the new Westminster system, our parliamentary system. And this is perhaps, I mean, it would require a little bit more research here to understand how unusual this is for a government in power to be systematically trying to bring in and cross people over the floor. That's what you're getting at, isn't it, Marco?
Yeah, the vote essentially establishes a limitation on the group that has formed the government. And that is a limitation on their power. That is the will of the electorate. What
Okay.
Mr. Carney essentially is doing is thumbing his nose at that and saying, I'm going to have my minority one way or the other.
Okay. So there's a comment earlier, Madam Producer, that was about the new Westminster system, I think from Sheridan Forbes, that said a very interesting point. The Westminster system once again proves Canadians have no real representation or rights. The floor crossings means your vote only matters until they have it. Then you'll be tossed to the side. So we'll see whether that pans out. But this is, I think, a common refrain I'm hearing. And I want to tell you for the record, because I do get a lot of emails, thousands of them, and I also get some phone calls. And it's interesting. I've gotten already a couple phone calls, people really angry about this issue of floor crossing, and a real sense of, and I want to tell you the words, betrayal is a common word that's used. A sense that, why do you vote, right? I mean, that's come up in the audience comments here. And also the sense of, what are they offering these floor crossers? So people are really turning to those questions that are understandable. And it goes to the point of that reporter's question about trust. We need trust in order in this system, as you've outlined, Marco, eloquently, a trust and confidence that the system is playing fair so that you can give your consent to be governed, right? And this is in that zone. I mean, this is stuff that we've studied for years and years in political science. And if you dare tread on that and start changing, if you start changing that kind of convention, then you do so at a certain peril. Georganne, your comment?
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly the conversation that I had with Marilyn Gladu on Sunday. I said to her that I felt that this was a true abuse of power, that it was going to be something that would fracture the trust of Canadians in their government, that it was not a fair representation of what they voted for in the last election, and that I did not understand how she could do this, considering that 2 weeks before she was supporting forcing anybody who crossed the floor to have a by-election. Okay, so the hypocrisy is rampant, there. And I think I'm going to be very frank with you. I think everyone that was involved in this, every single person was self-serving. They did it because they felt either that they were ignored, or they didn't get what they wanted, or they couldn't get government money because the government only gives money to the Liberals, which is true. They pretty much said so. Melanie Joly said it the other day, in fact. So, they're worried how they're going to be able to prove to their constituents they're doing their job. Mm-hmm. So that's what I think people, these people that moved over did it for their own self-serving purposes. And there was nothing principled about it. You are right. I think it was Marco who was talking about some of the people who crossed the floor in the past. They did it on principle. David Kilgore's a great example. And I knew Leona Ellison well, and I know she was very distressed over the way they were dealing with the military, and they made promises to her and completely backed out of all of those. So, people who do it for that reason, I can tolerate, even though I don't like it, but this is something completely different.
Okay.
Yeah. There is another layer here that kind of touches, and maybe we were going to talk about this later, so I apologize for jumping in about this, but the issue of trust is not just about the amount of power, but it's also about the guardianship of the institutions.
Exactly.
The people we elect, elect them not just to give them power to make decisions, but we also elect them to safeguard and preserve the institutions which we entrust them with.
Right.
And so by doing this, and by essentially fraying or damaging the trust that we have in our elected officials, we are also essentially damaging the trust that we place in the institutions of government.
Right. Exactly. So on that point, to be very clear, as political scientists, you look at this and you say, how is the practice of these institutions allow for high functioning governance? And this is regardless of party. This is not a question of party. And that's why the word guardian is very important. You need guardians in our society who dare to look at these facts and deal with them with clear-eyed vision and courage and make sure that they don't go down the drain.
We expect people to make decisions with the safeguard of the reputational value of the institutions at hand. We all remember, for example, whether we liked him or not, and many of us may not have liked Richard Nixon. Nixon resigned from the presidency of the United States, not because he wanted to. He resigned because he really, truly wished to preserve the reputation and the trust that people had in the institution of the presidency.
That's right. Yeah, exactly. You want to preserve that institution.
Yeah.
Okay, so I did want to turn now to a number of other related questions, and it's interesting. Maybe what I'll do, Madam Producers, is share this interesting clip from an interesting political commentator and policy commentator named Andrew Coyne, who I think has been on the CBC panel for 25 years or more. And it's interesting, his comment really reinforces these fundamental questions about the state of Parliament as an institution.
Then the votes are counted, and what does the voter see? He sees a Parliament that looks nothing like what the voters cast their ballots for, with the distribution of seats between the parties bearing no resemblance to the division of opinion in the country. He sees that the MP he elects has no real role or responsibility, but to stand up and sit down when he's told. He sees a Parliament that collectively has very little ability to hold governments to account. He sees that all power effectively resides in the office of the Prime Minister. In recent years, he's seen parties and leaders not only go back on their word or abandon their long-held convictions, but break their own laws. He's seen MPs being offered government jobs to cross the floor, and governments refusing to acknowledge confidence votes, or proroguing Parliament rather than face one, or defying express orders of Parliament to surrender documents. And you ask, why doesn't he vote? Frankly, the only mystery in all this is why so many people still do.
So that, my friends, is probably one of the most damning, succinct indictments of Parliament I've heard in a long time. I've certainly observed, like you have, this kind of analysis. I think of the great Donald J. Savoy talking about the concentration of power in the Prime Minister's office and all the rest. This is well documented. And yet this kind of summation from Andrew Coyne surprised me. Did it surprise you, Georganne Burke?
Oh, not at all. He, for the first time maybe ever, said something I agree with, Andrew Coyne. I feel that this is, as I said before, a huge betrayal, and it is contrary to the notion of democracy, representative government, even a parliamentary government. You elect people, and as you said before, you give them permission to govern you. And when you don't give them permission, either by defeating them or by a minority government, I don't know how they can look at themselves in the mirror when they go through the machinations that this guy's gone through to get himself a majority and think it's okay. There's no conscience involved there. This is actually a situation where you see someone in a position of power abusing that authority for his own gain. Now, the question will be, what is it that they're actually looking to do with all this power? That's what worries me, would keep me up at night. And I think probably everybody that's listening to this is being kept up at night with the same questions. What are their plans for Canadians with all that power?
Okay, well, let's turn to that question, because some may ask, why is this discussion relevant to policy? Well, obviously, if you don't understand how these institutions are functioning well or not, has a huge bearing on what kind of public policy you have. So let's turn to that issue of what does this mean, a majority government to policy. And I think that we've heard a government articulate, as the Prime Minister's remarks just a few minutes ago, that there's somehow a plan to move Canada forward. We see a lot of commercials across media calling Canada to rebuild, and how we've built the St. Lawrence Seaway to this and that, and that we need to get back to building great again. I'm not aware of any big projects yet. So what do you anticipate when it comes to the changes in policy? I mean, I think we've had a 10-cent clip on carbon taxes when it comes to fuel, so that's always welcome, but it's not a fundamental change. You could argue that there's been a lot of moves that the government's made that is, or more, they're moving in the right direction in a way, but it's often been characterized as a conservative light approach, like it's moving away from Trudeau-esque policies. That's one way to see it. Where do you think this government is really headed? I'm not totally sure on that. Did you want to comment, Marco?
Yeah. Let me first jump in and say that the premise of the assertion that the government can now govern betrays a certain kind of fantasy that is worth examining. And here's the reason why. Mr. Carney's government, from yesterday all the way back to the election, is not the first government in the history of this country that was given a minority. And there have been many governments, liberals and conservatives, with minorities that have been very effective and very capable and very efficient. Lester Pearson's government, for example, with a minority, accomplished a great deal. Pierre Trudeau himself had minority governments and accomplished quite a great deal. So I think the sell to the voters that one must absolutely have a majority in order to accomplish something is not valid. And what it says really is that this idea that now the government can accomplish things is more an excuse for the fact that over this past year, with a fairly functional minority, the government really hasn't done all that much. So the question is the government now going to do more or actual things with the majority? My gut feeling tells me that what they did not do with a minority, they're not suddenly going to do it now. The fact is that they might be in mathematics, in arithmetic, a majority. But the government is fractured. That government has some serious issues inside the caucus that are not necessarily going to bring them to a unanimous vote or a majority vote every single time. And so I want to caution people that what we should expect is not necessarily a government that is going to achieve a lot of things, but it's a government that is going to be mired in the same issues up to now.
Okay, so if I'm hearing you correctly, Marco, I don't want to put words in your mouth. You're predicting more of the same because of a divided caucus. Is that right?
Yes, that a government with a majority is only effective, if it wasn't effective before, it's only going to be effective if there is actually a will to pull all in the same direction. Mm-hmm. But many of the people you have brought in are not of the same mind, don't see the world in the same way, and the reason why the Prime Minister needed a majority in numbers is because already in the minority that he had trouble containing and dominating the caucus.
Okay. What do you think about that comment, Georganne, that a divided caucus means for a divided majority government?
I think that's very interesting, and I hadn't actually thought about it that way, Marco, so thank you for that. I do know that it is always a challenge for every prime minister to manage their caucus. One who was a real expert at it was Brian Mulroney. Mm-hmm. I don't know that I've seen anyone since then, or that has been really good at managing their caucus. And Mark Carney will not be an exception to my comment at all. His personality is very autocratic. He's very strict about what he expects from people. He doesn't give any leeway to anyone. So I can see this being a big problem. I agree with you there. In addition, some of the people he brought over will probably be very comfortable there. I know Michael Ma. He won't have a problem. I never understood why Chris D'Entremont was a conservative to begin with. He didn't strike me as a conservative. Marco, you know what I'm saying, right?
Yeah.
Matt Jeneroux was kind of a surprise to me. But the huge surprise, of course, was Maryland. And Lori Idlu, I don't know. She's just she'll do whatever they want her to do. She's gotten what she wanted, and she's happy. There are two people in this group of the five that could be questionable. The question is, who else is unhappy in that caucus? And I don't know specifics, but I'm sure there are. There always are. Every caucus, every single caucus has unhappy people. That's between liberals and conservatives, frankly, is that they know how to better manage their caucus. I don't know if this guy has found the right people to do it, because I don't know how they're operating over there. But if he doesn't, he'll be in trouble. If he follows the liberal pattern, he'll get good people to help manage his caucus.
Okay, so those are helpful comments. So divided caucus is a real challenge that will kind of undermine the ability to move decisively on a number of important policy files. And just to underline this point, is the context of this nation. We are a declining nation as we look to our economy with a low economic performance. And we've illustrated this many times. We've talked about the solutions to get out of this mess. But unless we pursue different policies, we'll get the same results, as they say, in basic logic. And so in this case, are you anticipating any big projects with a majority like this? Surely this is the time to build those pipelines, to be able to move forward on critical minerals and, incisive things that will move our economy forward. Tax reform, golly, that would be a great thing to move forward. And yet we just can't seem to have the political will. So does that mean we're just going to continue to get more of the same in terms of low economic performance? And if that's the case, then surely that will mean that the electorate will finally figure this out, that we don't really have a new government. Am I being too simplistic about this, Marco?
No, not at all. Just connecting it to the last kind of segment, if they were not able to do what they could do with the people that they had, I'm not entirely convinced that they're going to all of a sudden start building pipelines and start building like they claim. If they had really wanted to push the issue of pipelines, for example, they could have easily found consensus among the people from the other parties, including the sort of significant opposition from the conservatives, and gotten it done. So it's not just a question of numbers, it's the fact that there are a few Stephen Guilbeaus on the other side that don't want anything built at all, and for whom, a molecule of carbon in the air is going to poison the entire planet. And so he still has to deal with that.
Okay, because it is a very interesting question. We've heard that from a number of parties, that surely during this time of economic stagnation and decline in Canada, that there would be a willingness to reach across the aisle decisively with the Conservatives and say, these are the 5 things that we can do together and make a deal, much kind of like inverse what they did with the NDP going back over the last number of years that have gotten us into this pickle. Why wouldn't you join and create that kind of operating agreement on policy, Georganne? Is that too naive and idealistic?
Yes. So, to be blunt, I think that he will do what is good for Brookfield. He will do.
Pardon me?
Yeah, that's what he'll do. What's good for Brookfield. He will do what's good for China. He doesn't have the interests of Canada at heart. If he did, he would be drill, baby, drill, building pipelines. He would be using the wonderful, rich resources this country has to enrich the country, doing it responsibly. Nobody says be irresponsible. Do it responsibly. It's possible too. And then with more money coming in, everybody's taxes could be lowered, and we wouldn't be going through this stuff right now. I compare and contrast with the U.S. because, as you know, I've moved down there recently, and it's shocking to look back at Canada and see the decline that has happened. It's very sad to me. We moved to Canada in 1987. And Canada was on an upward curve, growing and developing and doing good things. Toronto was a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful city, clean and safe.
Mm-hmm.
And, the whole country was a wonderful place to be. Now, all I hear from people, and I hear it day in and day out, is how am I going to get out of here? I don't know if Mark Carney wants that to be his legacy, but if he continues down the way he is going, that is what's going to happen. I wasn't being facetious when I said he's going to do what's good for Brookfield. I think he has no other interest than enriching the people who are already rich, and controlling the rest of us peons and serfs.
Okay, wow. So there you have it from Georganne Burke, is that you're looking at the decision making in a different light of one of narrow self-interest. So my question though is that really in contrast with so many Canadians? It seems like, I mean, I could show you poll after poll that says that the Prime Minister is very much appreciated. He seems to be quite a few points ahead of the Leader of the Opposition. So what are we missing here? Is it the legacy media again that provides the kind of image that Carney is a dedicated Prime Minister who's competent and who has the trust of most Canadians now? It's kind of remarkable, isn't it, Georganne?
It's very remarkable considering that I actually had a joke with my friends who are anti-Trump, who voted for Trump's candidate, Carney. And I said, I didn't vote for Trump's candidate. I voted for the other guy. I don't think Canadian voters were thinking in this last election, many of them, the ones that morphed over from the conservative side to the liberal side. And there was a move in that direction, and largely because of the fact that Trudeau left, he was gone, and they despised him, and also because of Trump, who they also despise. It was a very emotional election. This was not an election based on policy. If it was, Pierre Poilievre would have won hands down. This was a purely emotional election, and people are going to pay a big price for that over the next 4 years. A big price.
So your take on it is that Canadians are generally voting on a more of a feeling emotional basis,
yes,
and hence the decision. What are your comments, Marco? Any thoughts?
Yeah, if it were about policy, for example, many of us, most of us, would be up in arms at the fact that, for example, the promise that all interprovincial barriers were going to disappear by the 1st of July last year had disappeared, and they have not. And so if we put it back in the framework of a minority or a majority, here's the test that I would like our listeners and the electorate to consider. If it is true that the Prime Minister is committed to removing all interprovincial barriers, and that we now have the excuse that, well, he didn't have a majority government and that's why he couldn't do it, even though he promised he was going to do it anyway, I would expect that in the next 3 months, all interprovincial barriers are going to disappear. Right. So if he is really the trade guy that he says he is, if a lack of trade is bad and therefore Trump is bad because he's putting on tariffs, then wouldn't the reasonable thing to do now that he has all this power concentrated in his hands, the power of majority government, remove all the tariffs? Because the trade barriers are essentially that. They're tariffs inside our own country. And so is that going to happen? I submit that it won't. Right? And so what we have really is a series of appeals that have this ugly anti-American edge, the purpose of which really is to elicit emotion, as Georganne was saying, and obtain votes. But they're not really interested in policy, and they're not really interested in the policy plan, even the one that they put forward.
Okay. So, gosh, what do you think, audience? I mean, the comments are coming in fast and furious. One comment here is how many jobs we need to lose before we stand up to manage the decline here. So, yeah, I think most people would recognize that Canada's on a decline. So it'll be fascinating to see whether this government will actually move forward the reversal of that decline decisively, or will just kind of play a kind of a short-term political calculus to try to keep in power in those terms. That's certainly one way to see it. I want to turn to a very interesting issue when we talk about and speculate about policy. And one came up out of the Liberal Convention, which was held this past week in Montreal. And because sometimes conventions obviously have to be taken with a huge grain of salt, but they are kind of prototypical labs for public policy discussion, if you can listen to them. We saw the NDP a few weeks ago with their equity cards stand up, and that, of course, reflects a heartfelt desire to deal and placate to victims and that kind of Marxist ideology. But in the Liberal Convention, we saw a very curious policy idea that kind of went viral, and it was from a fellow that made us through the University of Waterloo and ended up at Google, and I think he lives in the UK with his fortune, and is wondering out loud, given Canada's generosity of subsidies, well, whether there should be some kind of departure tax on people who leave the country. If we could just share this clip. And perhaps we don't have it, but I do want to cite it, and it has to do with the fact that you had I believe his name was Patrick Pichette, who said that there should be a tax for those people leaving the country so that they won't leave it. And to me, I thought this was almost an absurd set of policy ideas. I thought it was metaphorical to what I saw in Eastern Europe so many years ago with the Berlin Wall and the desire to keep people kind of literally captured in their country. How is this seen as even a serious policy concept? And I'm just shocked that this guy wasn't laughed out of the room. What does this say about the Liberal Party at this juncture, about policy?
Well, they actually suggested $500,000.
$500,000 as a departure tax?
As the exit tax. Like, are you guys joking? I'm so glad that I got out of there before they actually got this power, because this is ridiculous. It's just highway robbery, and it is designed, as you said, to keep people locked in and unable to go. Who's got that kind of money? I mean,
Right.
except rich people who can do whatever they want anyway, right?
Yeah. Well, and the last time I checked, I thought this was an infringement on the Charter of mobility rights.
Yes,
So I think this creates a problem. But I think that does it perhaps foreshadow a tone of what the party's prepared to move on? Marco, your comment?
Yeah, people are entitled to have stupid ideas. And in political conventions, sometimes people come up with stupid ideas, and that is a stupid idea. The thing that surprised me wasn't the stupid idea, is the reception that it received from the audience. People began to clap. They should have booed the guy, right? But the fact that they clapped tells you something. That, by the way, on the same week, or nearly the same week, in which we announced 180 million for Ukraine, and 12 million for Sudan, and 8 million for Cuba. And so we're sending this money abroad to all these people, some of whom are like outright dictators. But we want to put $500,000 ahead on a tax for young people to leave, because the people who are leaving are not the people who think this country is doing great. The people who are leaving because they see the decline and they see the troubles that are coming, at least the storms that they perceive on the horizon. And so we want to punish them for that. So it's ridiculous. And as you say, never mind the fact that it is dead against the Charter of Rights. Because of mobility rights. I can think of no country in the world, not one, that prevents people from leaving their borders that is a liberal democracy or a well-established country in the world. Not a one.
No, it's very disconcerting. So as we look a little bit more about so-called policy solutions, we've had a far-reaching conversation about the institution of Parliament, and I want to give some examples here. We've talked about floor crossers as an example. What is really the solution to that, or is there one?
Solution to floor crossers? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, like if we look at the whole concept here, number one would be triggering by-elections automatically for floor crossing, in the sense that if we believe that floor crossers can do it at will for their own narrow self-interest, is there a solution? Do you need to trigger a by-election?
Yeah.
And
So
I think the question is, so what? What do we do about it?
so they can trigger a by-election if they create a law that says they can. The other thing is they could create a law that says you must sit as an independent, not
Mhm.
go to another party. If you want to leave your party, you can just sit as an independent. Okay, they could do that too, but they're not going to do any of that because it doesn't suit their purpose. I don't know if I was a conservative, which I am. I mean, if I was a conservative member of parliament, I'd be looking at this and saying, "This is what happens when you let these things get out of control. This is completely." Um, you know, an authoritarian move on the part of an authoritarian guy. This is what I think we're going to be seeing. Is he is not a person who believes in democracy. He is not a person who believes in the representative government that he's been elected to run. He believes that he is in control, just like he was when he was the head of Brookfield. How he
Okay.
sees it. That's how he sees it.
All right. So that's your take on that. Let's hope you're wrong, Georganne, but we will
I hope
see.
I am, but I don't
Mhm.
know.
In terms of other solutions there, Madam Producer, I'm just curious, with that slide there, we had also the question of the role of the media and then finally citizen involvement. We don't have a lot of time left, but what has the role of the media been here? Is that really exacerbated the kind of challenges we have in the institution of parliament now, where Andrew Coyne is saying, golly, I'm looking at all these facts and I'm wondering, do we have a representative democracy? So what's the role of the media in all this? Is there an easy answer to that, Marco?
There is, in 3 seconds, is cut them off the subsidies, right? If you cut them off the subsidies, then they're no longer the lap chihuahua that they have become. But the real solution is not to prevent people from crossing the floor, or what happens when they cross the floor. The real solution is for people to become more influential voters with their political parties. Join a party, join the constituency associations, make that bond and that connection so close and so meaningful that people will think twice about betraying the will of the electors.
Okay, so get involved.
I agree with you. It's very important.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. So, we've covered a lot of ground today. And I guess if I look to the future here, one of the big challenges the government faces is really obviously the state of our economy, but specifically the state of our trade negotiations with the United States and Mexico. Does anyone have a crystal ball, Georganne? What's going to happen there on that front?
Well, I have an opinion. I won't call it a crystal ball, but I believe that Mark Carney never wanted to renegotiate CUSMA, and I don't think Trump does either. I think that Trump is willing to negotiate a separate pact with Mexico. He never saw Canada and Mexico as being equals in the trade sense. So we think he'll do a deal with Mexico, and he has completely washed his hands of Canada. That's why he's looking at Greenland, because he doesn't trust Canada to be a good security partner to the north. I think that CUSMA will fall apart. That's what I believe.
Okay. So there you have it. So CUSMA will fall apart, according to your anticipation. And so then where will we sit? Some kind of bilateral agreement that may or may not happen in a timely fashion.
Yeah, well, that's the problem. We don't know. Listen, we've got a very stubborn president in the United States who doesn't really like this guy very much. Okay. But he also knew that he could handle him, and he was concerned about the unbalanced relationship that he saw between Canada and the U.S. He saw it that way. People kept saying, no, you're wrong. You're wrong. Well, okay, you can say he's wrong, but that's how he saw it. That's not how you handle someone like him.
Yeah.
You don't have to pat him on the head, but you can say, well, let's figure out how we work together. That's not what happened. That's the problem.
There's been disengagement now with the Carney government and the Trump administration. The Trump
Actually,
administration.
I just saw something today that they have not met, and this came from a well-placed source in the American government. They've not had significant meetings since last fall.
Okay. So, meanwhile, the Mexican agreement is coming to an end, I understand. So the Mexican government is far ahead with its agreement with the United States,
Yes.
and Canada is not really engaged, or at least that appears to be the information we have.
Right. Yeah, and I think that's the way Carney wants it. As your listeners commenting here, he wants that. He wants a deal with China. That's what he wants. Good luck, Canadians.
Okay. Now, I have heard an alternative thesis, and that is that the engagement that Canada is making with China is an effort to try to obviously take advantage of those opportunities, particularly on energy of all things, but also is an opportunity to try to create some form of leverage with the United States, that somehow, if you don't want to play with us, then we'll kind of engage with the enemy. I mean, I mean, it's hard to understand the opportunities when it comes to that kind of thinking, but it does raise questions around where is the future of our trading relationship? Because if CUSMA is not renewed in some form, and particularly a bilateral relationship, so Canada retains this favored nation status where so much of our goods and services go tax-free, that will put Canada's economy in deeper jeopardy. That would be the concern, obviously. Marco, any comment on that?
Yeah, I tend to rearrange the acronym to spell Camus.
Yes,
with it,
Camus.
Because the pessimistic existentialist philosopher. But playing around aside, I am fairly pessimistic in the same way almost as Georganne. I don't think that this free trade agreement is going to be tripartite. I think that ship has sailed. It will leave us basically to negotiate with the Americans and the Americans to dictate their terms. The way to negotiate with people, by the way, is not to tell them that they are inferior, is not to tell them that they are lesser, is not to demonize them. That is so anti-Canadian, is so anti this idea that we used to have that we were honest brokers. You don't kick dust into people's faces and then decide to invite them and say, "Hey, be nice to us and negotiate on fair basis," right? So we've done the exact opposite. That's not by mistake. Canadian diplomats can tell you that it's not in keeping with the traditions of diplomacy in this country. So what is happening is really must be, I have to conclude, that it's a deliberate attempt at kibotching the talks.
Okay, well said. Let's hope that on so many of these counts that Georganne and Marco are wrong, that we actually move this country forward despite these kinds of analyses, because it is obviously a concerning time. There's a lot of challenges our country faces. But in the meantime, I'm really grateful that we could have this conversation, Georganne and Marco, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
Great to see you.
And thank you as well to our audience for joining us. You've been very active, and we really appreciate it. And thank you for your questions and comments. And be sure to continue to work with us. We thank you very much, all these parties, including our producer, Lorraine, and of course our audience, as well as catch us every week on these different channels across the country. And in the meantime, we look forward to seeing you next week, and be sure to check out our Frontier website and follow us on these channels.
Here at Frontier, we don't receive any government funding. We are nonpartisan and we work for you. Find out more and support this important work by visiting fcpp.org today.